Welcome once again to our show. This is Frank Avila, your host, and thank you for watching. On my right, I have John Bambenek, and I might have mispronounced the name, I apologize, and Bruno Behrend, and that is not B-A-R-O-N, and he's no stranger to our show. You've seen him before, and today we're going to talk Con. And John, pronounce your name one more time.
Bambenek.
Bambenek. So for our viewing audience, Bambenek. So both of you are involved with the issue of the Constitutional Convention. And I know that some of our viewers have already seen a show with Bruno Behrend. And Bruno, you're also on the radio, is that correct?
Right. I'm on radio in WKRS in Waukegan, 1220 a.m. and
1220 a.m.
WKRS.com if you're outside of the listening area. It basically covers Lake County and southeastern Wisconsin.
And when are you on?
10 o'clock to noon on Mondays and Fridays.
Okay. Now, is that the same station that John Cox and Al Salvi were on in the past?
Al Salvi is on in the same time slot on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He still is. So they've got what they call in my time slot, they call it the Wise Guys. I'm on Mondays and Fridays, then it's Al Salvi on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then they got a couple of doctors doing a doctor show on Wednesdays, and they're pretty good. So it's
well, give me one time your call letters and number.
WKRS, and it's WKRS.com if you want to listen online, and it's 1220 a.m. if you're up in Lake County.
Okay. And it only for the radio itself, the signal only hits Lake County.
Lake County and southeastern Wisconsin. We get up into Kenosha and close to we can actually get up to Milwaukee.
So in the Chicago area, you got to go online, and one more time the times.
10 o'clock to noon, Mondays and Fridays.
Okay. Now, John, what is the Constitutional Convention?
Basically, every 20 years, voters have the opportunity to call for a convention, which would either propose amendments or rewrite the entire document, or a combination of both. And that vote is coming up again this November.
Okay. Now, I see you can see learn a little bit about this on your website. Is that correct?
My website, John's website.
Okay. Well, why don't you both give us, John? What is your website?
Well, I write. My own site is parttimepundit.com, but most of the stuff I'm writing for the convention.
Parttimepundit.com. It is P-U-N-D-I-T.
That's correct.
Okay. Parttimepundit.com and
extremewisdom.com is my radio show site, and then both of us together have started up 3 new websites for the Con. One is IllinoisCitizensCoalition.com. That's got all the text information.
And that's on the screen right now, Illinois Citizens Coalition.com.
Yeah, and then we've got a nice simple one for everybody to remember that's going to have all the video on it. That's YesForIllinois.com. And then John and I wrote a constitution. I think John wrote more of it than I did, actually, but we actually wrote a new constitution, and it's up there for editing, and people can play with it, and that is at...
Like a Wikipedia?
It's almost like, well, right now it's a blog setup, not a wiki setup, but we're looking for a wiki setup for it, and people can go and edit it, they can comment on it, they can write their own text. It's called myillinoisconstitution.org.
Okay. Now, you should also see his extreme wisdom. Why? Because our show with Anissa Preitza from Fox News and myself interview Bruno Behrend, and you can get a good idea what the Constitutional Convention is. But today I want to go into some of the political issues, too. I do want to describe a little bit for those who haven't seen the first show, but I've been reading a little bit on Capital Facts and then their corollary blog, Illinois, and then also on the Illinois Review, which is a conservative website that the Con is being discussed. And I think you were in a debate with a conservative pundit who's also on the radio on the Wade and Roma show, Dan Proft.
Right, I was debating Dan Proft.
Okay, and we want to talk a little bit about that debate. But go into a little bit more about Con. You described that every 20 years it happens. Are we going to rewrite a whole new constitution, or are we going to amend it, or change it? What are we going to do? What is this all about?
Well, for the most part, that's up to the delegates who get elected in terms of what they want to
Let me break in. How do people get elected?
Assuming we vote yes in November, the General Assembly will set a date for an election sometime in the future, and they have some degree of autonomy in when they set that election to be. It may be in the 2010 election cycle. It may be a special election cycle. And then, people will, much like they fill out petitions to run for office now, they run for that office. There'll be 2 delegates elected per Senate district, per state Senate district. So it'll probably be, you'll see a list of 4 or more candidates, pick 2, and the highest 2 vote getters are delegates to the convention for that district.
Now, we talked about on the last show how a lot of the names you see in politics today, Mike Madigan, Rich Daley, aldermen at the time, even people who are kind of pioneers in different issues, although not in the mainstream, like James Gierak. And then one of the issues is the Shackman, that Shackman filed his lawsuit on political workers based on his non-election to the Constitutional Convention. Will you see that same kind of dynamic again, where you had a lot of the bigger names in politics, Michael Madigan or whoever the newcomers are involved in the Constitutional Convention?
Well, Michael Madigan actually pretty much got his big political start at the convention in '68. Before that, he did. I mean, he was growing within his party organization, of course.
Was he a state rep already by that time?
No. I don't believe so. I think he went from the convention to eventually become a state rep. Mayor Daley's son, who is now the current Mayor Daley,
was he a senator by that time, or?
I don't believe so.
So none of them were even elected officials.
None of them were. I think our read is that only 2 state reps were delegates to the convention. There were also a whole bunch of new people who came in. So one of the debates, one of the things that people use when debating this, saying that, oh, the same people that are running the state now are going to be running the convention, there's actually a lot of evidence that that's not the case. A lot of new people will get elected. There was John, I guess his name is John Anderson from down, and that's not the guy who ran for president, but there was Anderson who I met a few months ago, became one of the youngest delegates ever. We had a new delegate. There were actually 5 people from the city of Chicago that were reform, non-machine candidates who won. So certainly the machine's going to get its people in. The downstate Republicans are going to get some of their people in. But we think that there's going to be a very large number of new people, new blood, in this delegate race.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the politics of it a little bit. What is the bill number in the House? Is there a bill number already?
No, there's not. The General Assembly is still currently researching some of the background stuff, but for the General Assembly to have put the question on the ballot, they needed to do so by May 4th. The result is the Secretary of State will put the question on there, but there's still a joint committee out there who's going to put out some supporting documentation, explain this to the voters.
And if we were to pass, how would the delegates be elected? Would they at large or from geographic areas?
It would be within the Senate district. It's up to the legislature of what they're going to do if there's a yes vote. So they have a lot of leeway. What will probably happen is that there will be an open primary and an open general like they did in 1970 or the 68 through 70 process. But it could also be that they make it a partisan election, that it's Democrats and Republicans. They basically could do a lot. This is where everybody, again, argues that they can play with the process, but they can really only play with the process up to a point. It's going to be the same number of signatures for everybody. So if they make it a partisan election, then you could run in your district and you could get Democrat signatures, you could get Republican signatures, or you could just get the same number of signatures if it was an open primary, like you do for a school board.
Now, John, who are the proponents of the Constitutional Convention in the House?
There are about 48, based on there's a resolution last year. The bigger names, Representative Freilich and Fritchie, seem to be the ones that are pushing strongest.
John Fritchie has a blog himself, one of the better blogs, I think, out there in terms of quality and images and content. Even he claims he writes it all himself, and John Fritchie's a friend, so I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm impressed that he's so prolific at writing. I don't have the time personally to write as much as some people do on the blog, but he's very intelligent, very articulate. But I would think from our talking before the show that he's on the other side of the political spectrum than you gentlemen are.
Right.
No, that's correct.
Okay, so you'd be farther to the right, he'd be farther to the left, whatever that spectrum would be. So this is not an ideological issue then, per se.
No, if you take a look at the House resolution and how they voted, there was no real partisan breakdown. I mean, there were Republicans for and against it in equal numbers, and Democrats for and
Are there
against
conservatives and liberals for it?
Yeah, I mean, we're both conservatives, liberal, you know. Pat Quinn is pretty left, he's for it, and they're both against it. The unions are against, and the business groups are against.
Okay.
So there's really no ideological breakdown per se.
Now, I've seen John Fritchie blog on it, and he's a very strong proponent of it. Who is the leader then with the Republicans?
We are.
Okay.
I mean, sadly, on the conservative side in this state, they're so beat down that they don't even seem to be able to conceive of a victory or having a place at the table. So I hate to put it this negatively, but I am a radio host, so I'll use strong language. They're just cowering in the corner, you know, saying, "Oh, don't beat us, don't hurt us." And so basically, from a Republican standpoint, there's a couple of reps that are for it. Bill Black down in the Danville area, he's a very strong proponent. Steve Rauschenberger's no longer there. I've met with him. He was against it, then he was for it. Now he's a lobbyist, so I don't really know where he stands on it. But from a standpoint of conservatives in the state of Illinois or Republicans in the state of Illinois, they're either ambivalent or silent or running away in fear.
Well, you had given a talk, I think it was Wheeling, and I won't say my friend's name, but a friend who heard you talk, and he's a conservative, he's a Republican. And he had concerns that, and we discussed this on the last show, that you state that the state of the state is more anti-government, more anti-big government, where maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, there was more of a Keynesian, you know, John Kenneth Galbraith economic type of model, and more trust in government and FDR government solutions. And you think it's more smaller government, more limited government. Is that?
It's interesting. Certainly we're more socially liberal now.
Well, that was his concern,
yeah,
that we're much more socially liberal
than we were in 1970.
Right, because Mike Madigan is pro-life. Daley at that time was pro-life. And an issue, for example, like gay marriage would have never even been on the table at that time. Yeah.
So what? We're going to, if we don't have a convention, gay marriage is going to be on the table anyway. John and I talk about this all the time. We're 1 or 2 seats away from a veto-proof Democrat majority in the House. So when the Illinois business...
But you have a Democratic speaker who's still somewhat socially conservative.
Somewhat. But he doesn't, I mean, I don't know Mike Madigan personally. I don't know what his decisions are on a lot of these social issues. But the fact is that anything that the social conservatives or the Illinois Business Roundtable is afraid of getting in a convention is coming down the tracks in anyway.
Well,
in the,
for
in the
example,
state.
a progressive income tax. And
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of debate on the blogs, especially the Rich Miller Corollary Illinois blog, about a state income tax. And there's one blogger who I think works for Senator Sandoval, part of the progressive, Dan Johnson Weinberger. He's very pro the state income, progressive income tax. And there's others who have written essays why it's not good. And one other thing is Democrats are more firmly in control of the body politic than they were 20 years ago. And that so things like a progressive income tax, if that is bad, and I'm not saying it's bad, but if that was something Republicans didn't want, it's something that certainly would be on the agenda if not passed.
Well, it's on the agenda now. There's a Senate constitutional amendment sponsored by the senator whose district's 2 blocks away from where I live, Senator Freerichs, that would have given a progressive income tax. Now, that got killed in the House. But the important thing to realize is that if you're afraid that Democrats will just give us all of these bad things, they can do that now by putting any constitutional amendment on the ballot passed by 60%.
But doesn't the Constitution give more power to an issue rather than just passing it legislatively? So then in 10 years, if there's a switch back to one party or another, then that might be reversed legislatively?
Well, this was a constitutional amendment that Senator Freerichs proposed. He actually proposed to amend the Constitution that had the flat tax there and get it out now. So the General Assembly has the power to put any constitutional amendments it wants on the table. If it wants to put gay marriage on the ballot, it can do so. And the only election they have to win is the 60% vote from the public, you know, at the next general election. For a constitutional convention, well, they have to win the yes vote. They have to win a majority, you know, a healthy majority of the delegate races. They have to win in the convention, and then they have to get the vote after the convention is done. So if you're looking at flat tax, they're already talking about trying to put that on the ballot now, and they'll probably try again in 2010. And it's a lot easier for them to change it outside the convention than change it inside.
So why is a constitutional convention good?
The way I put it, and this is just the simplest, you know, if you want to keep it simple, we need to put citizens back in control of Illinois. And this is the only way we'll ever get citizens back in control of Illinois, because the current political structure, combined with the Constitution, combined with the kind of leadership that we have in this state right now, there's no way for citizens to gain control back. So if you want recall, you're going to have a convention. If you want ballot initiative, you're going to have a convention. if you want the ability to get transparent government where their balance sheets and their business interests
Well, couldn't the last
online.
one be accomplished legislatively? The first two certainly you need
right.
constitutional.
Could you get transparency in theory? See, and this is what's so funny about listening to Dawn Clark-Netsch and some of the people who say, well, we could get that with better leadership. The condition of leadership in this state is a function of the Constitution. So you can theorize that someday somebody might pass some good transparency legislation. But the fact of the matter is they're not going to. They might pass some cheesy transparency legislation that basically hides more information or gives transparency for some things but not other things. Look at what's going on right now with the debate in the with Fritschie's pay-to-play bill. I mean, it's full of loopholes. So if you really want to fix pay-to-play, get a convention and say these things can be done and these things can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
John?
Well, I guess from a philosophical point of view, I mean, one of the functions of a constitution is to restrict the amount of bad things a bad elected official can do. It's sort of a pessimistic document. You know, you have the Bill of Rights in the federal constitution to say, well, no, we don't want our government officials just randomly searching and seizing our stuff, or jailing people without due cause, or restricting free religion or free speech or free association. And those restrictions on government debt, because that
Let's
amendment
repeat
was
that figure, 108
$108 billion.
Right.
with a B.
With a B.
And that's in 40 years since the last convention in 1968.
That's a lot of apples.
Yeah.
There's $1.4 billion in 1968, and that's part of the reason that the balanced budget was put in. They figured $1.4 billion is a big number in 1968.
No, I understand, and this was some time ago, and I saw the figures, that there were similarly tens of billions, maybe now to hundreds of billions, I don't know, but I think 20 billion in 94 of unfunded pension debt also.
Right.
So I don't even think that's included in your figures.
No,
It is included in the in that $108 billion figure. Most of it at this point in time is unfunded pension liabilities. And John wrote the solution to that problem, which is to, and this is one of the other interesting things going back to the politics of it. We've got when all the teachers unions are coming out, most of them, I think only the Chicago Teachers Union is coming out for a convention. All of them are coming out against a convention vote because they think that someone's going to take away their pensions. Having a convention vote is the only way that these folks are going to save their pensions. And we've found when we've gone to presentations that people who are going to be relying on state pensions flip their opinion immediately in favor of a convention once they find out what we're talking about with a fix. And John has more details on that.
Well, before we go to that, though, won't they just keep on paying the pension out of the general fund and doing a shell game?
There comes a certain point where the state can't do that anymore, and they're in a bankruptcy.
But aren't they doing that now?
Not yet. The pensions aren't in a place where they cannot pay their obligations. They're
Well,
underfunded.
I thought we've taken money out of the pension.
We have taken money out of the pensions, but the number of people drawing the pensions doesn't compromise the funds
we've
that's
taken
there.
money out of the pension to put in the general fund.
That's correct.
So we've borrowed, so we have to pay the money back. Now, have we paid the money back?
No.
Okay.
Not even close.
Okay, so in a sense, then, we are doing a shell game.
Well, right. It's we were promising to contribute. Like I'm in the state pension because I work for the University of Illinois. I contribute 8% of my salary. The state's supposed to contribute 8%. So kind of a 401k matching style thing.
Well, that's
Obviously,
not
the
as
rules
good
are
as
different.
other governmental agencies where you don't have any contributions.
Well,
and you have a
the
guaranteed
Chicago
result.
teachers is a little bit different. I mean, most of the downstate pensions, it's about 8 and 8. Maybe it's 8, 6.5, 7.5, but that's how it is downstate. And I can't really speak because of the Chicago teachers. They have a different deal. Right. But for the most part, the state's never contributed that. So it'd be like you got a 401k with an employer that says, okay, I will match 2 for 1. For every $2 you put in, I put in $1. And they say, well, I'm not going to put that dollar in this year. I'll make up for you next year. And they do that for 40 years, and eventually, we have the crisis that we have now with a big portion of that $108 billion being.
Well, $108 billion is not easy to come back on, though. That's not a small.
Not at all. And that's where, you see, this is where one of the things we don't understand about the Republican Party and the Illinois business community is that if they had if they thought about this with anything other than fear, if they thought about it in terms of opportunity and in terms of how to really fix the state, they'd see that voting yes and getting a new constitution is the obvious answer, because the problems have gotten so big that pretty much only a constitution is going to fix them. Sooner or later, the pension situation is going to end up in court. And if it ends up in court, you're either going to get a court mandating a tax increase to pay them, or you're going to get a court cutting benefits to be able to pay them, or you're going to get somebody who decides to split the difference. So the only way to fix the pension issue is to have a convention and fix it. And one of the ways that we do that is we say, well, whatever benefits you're going to promote or provide, you have to pay for them in real time. So very similar to the balanced budget clause. If you really want a balanced budget clause, you say that a balanced budget means, you know, any monies minus any expenditures, and you can't include debt. So there's no way to debt finance a balanced budget. Illinois does
which
not,
we've been doing.
Yeah. And so, what balanced budget clause? How can you say you wrote a balanced budget clause in 1970 and have $108 billion of unfunded pension liability?
Well, that was something that Steve Rauschenberger spoke about before he became a lobbyist. I think when he was running for governor, then lieutenant governor.
Right.
But also John Fritchie, when he voted for the second to last budget, he said he did vote for it, and they were supposedly screaming at him on the floor because he wasn't getting the vote. He said, "I regret voting for it, and we have a serious pension problem."
Right.
So now, what are the answers then? Is the Constitutional Convention just going to resolve everything?
Well, a constitutional...
I mean, where do you still get the $105 billion from?
Well, the particular reform that Bruno mentioned, it won't necessarily fix that 105, but it will prevent them from continuing to not fund it and take money out going forward. It'll kind of stop the bleeding in the meantime. The rate of funding is about 50 to 60%. You know, if you can grow that with good investments and kind of pay that back over time, it's a manageable problem. But for the last 10 years, there's a couple years they took money out. They've not been contributing their fair share. The problem is just getting exponentially worse, because not only are they not, you know, at least making good on the promises that they're making this year, they're even cutting short of their current benefit or their current promises. So the problem, it just keeps compounding and compounding, and eventually, you know, it will break.
Okay. What did Dan Proft articulate to you when you debated him on the reasons why he did not want a constitutional convention?
Most of the no arguments revolve around, the good no arguments, the ones that are worthy of debate, revolve around two things. One is, from a conservative perspective, since both Dan and I mean, I'm a conservative talk show host, and he's a conservative pundit and consultant. He was basically saying the Democrats are going to control the convention. You'll never be able to pass anything you want. So it's not that I disagree with you on the issues. It's just you're not going to be able to get it. And then the flip side of it is we can get better changes incrementally by getting better people in office. And when our book comes out, Illinois Deserves Better, we address both those arguments.
That's a book that you co-wrote.
Yeah. And you can see... There's actually a great deal of weakness in the no arguments. They sound good on the surface, but for example, when people say, well, the Democrats are going to control the convention, I got news for you. Democrats already control everything. The Democrats, ideologically, at some level, they kind of control the leadership of the Illinois Republican Party even, because their party's not running on any good ideas. They're just running on the fact that we're not Democrats.
Well, ostensibly, Minority Leader Tom Cross is more liberal, at least in certain issues, than Democratic House Speaker Michael Madigan.
And again, whatever Tom Cross's positions are on whatever issues doesn't even bother me. It's like there isn't a Republican in the state running on any good ideas. So what are people going to vote for? I mean, people might put the Republicans back in office because the Democrats have really messed things up. But why would they go back to the Republicans when the Democrats are only doing what the Republicans did for 25 years, only not as egregiously as perhaps Rod Blagojevich did? So we're saying the Democrats already control everything. The one chance you have to get it back is to have a convention and fight these issues out. Fight for the good issues. If someone who supports John Fritchie or David Johnson Weinberger wants to be a delegate and I get to be a delegate, well, let's debate the income tax. Let's go in there and debate whether we want to have the gay marriage.
Why does the business community oppose the convention?
Well, my view, and I don't know if...
And when you say the business community, like the Chamber of
Commerce and Illinois Business Roundtable, here's my quick take on it. when they pick up the phone and call somebody, they get their telephone call answered, so they already have access. They get to go to lunch at the Sangamo Club. They get to sit around with all the corporate public affairs types, and they already have access, so they think they can protect themselves. I think it's kind of cynical, and I think it's kind of cowardly, because if they're losing everything they're trying to fight for anyway. They're going to lose the flat tax. They're going to lose a lot of these pension issues. So why wouldn't they pony up support for changing things?
And the labor unions, if they're already in control or their allies are already there, the Democrats, Speaker Madigan, Emil Jones, then why would they oppose it?
Well, for the most part, the public argument they're making is that the pension guarantee is up for grabs. And that's something the business community wants to remove from the Constitution because they think it's stifling. And they just want to be able to have the state promise pensions and then 40 years after working say, never mind. And the unions, of course, are not very comfortable with that prospect. Now, I've explained to them why that
Can there be a middle ground, such as a guaranteed contribution but not a guaranteed result?
Well, I guess the middle ground I do is that instead of the state appropriating the pensions, the employing agency has to simply pay their pension contribution out of their budget. And you can sue, say, the University of Illinois, if they don't put in their 8% for me, I can sue them and get money. I can't sue the General Assembly
for the general budget right now.
Well, yeah, it should come out. How it works now, it comes out of the appropriations process, and it's subject to all the political pressures that's involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if it's just the University of Illinois,
so it's like
just
not
them
saving
paying
for
a
a rainy day.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of cynical. The business community should be for this, and they're not. I think it's because they already have access and they're already kind of situated, so they don't care as much as they ought to. The unions, public employee unions, they're really cynical because they're basically saying, we've already got the pension guarantee. We don't want them to write a guarantee that you actually have to pay into the pension fund, because this way we can do the shell game with all the funding and all the money. So they think they've already got what they want. They don't want to fix the system. They're cynically saying, we like the system just the way it is. And the interesting thing is that when we talk to teachers who are looking forward to having to have pensions, or when we talk to individuals, I got a call the other day based off of an op-ed that John wrote. We took a phone call from a guy who works for the Department of Corrections downstate, and he's an employee. He's going to be on a pension, and he saw the article, and he said, you're absolutely right. Our pensions... For anybody watching this right now who's going to be on a public pension, a no vote puts their pension in much more danger than a yes vote does.
Well, Bruno and John, we're almost out of time. Real quickly, I want you to give your websites, and I look forward to your guys' book, by the way. Give the websites and your contact information.
IllinoisCitizensCoalition.com is the main website. YesForIllinois.com is the other website.
John, what's your website?
PartTimePundit.com.
PartTimePundit.com.
And MyIllinoisConstitution.org.
MyIllinoisConstitution.org. John and Bruno, thank you very much for being on the show. That's all the time we have, and thank you to our viewing audience for watching. Goodbye. God bless.